Hi, everyone, and welcome to our second instalment of our CandLE podcast. I'm joined today by Marion Stanton, our Head of Education. I'm Annamaria. I'm the Deputy Head of Education at CandLE, and we're very welcome. We've got Alannah here, who's one of our students, our amazing students, and Alannah's dad, Damien. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. So we've sort of thought it'd be a great idea at the moment to do this podcast in the light of lots of sort of shockwaves that have gone through the sector at the moment around the SEND reforms and the press releases and leaks from governments around the SEND reforms and what that can mean for us as an organisation, for our students and their families. Sort of the SEND reforms are saying that they're potentially going to remove EHCPs, remove individualised support for students. There is some talks of trying to push a more inclusive ethos into mainstream schools, which is great. So there's definitely going to be some pros and cons with some of these reforms. And that shift towards inclusive education would definitely be welcomed.
Very much so.
But obviously, the thought of getting rid and removing EHCPs for our families and for our students is obviously going to have such a huge impact in the work we do and for our students and our families. So that's sort of what we're sort of framing our sort of conversations around today. But I think it'd be useful as well, perhaps first of all, to hear about Alannah and your story, Damien and Alannah, and how sort of what Alannah's background really in her story.
So originally, I think, Alannah, you came to me for an assessment. Now, when was it, Damien?
It was about 2 years ago.
2 years ago. So you came here and had an assessment with me. But what prompted that, Damien?
Yeah. Well, basically, Alannah's been at a special school and had an education healthcare plan since she was really early years, And the education healthcare plan has kind of been crucial to Alannah's education so far, Basically, the background is initially Alannah was receiving a kind of a sensory curriculum at the special school. And Alannah basically told me with her eyes and her actions that she needed more, little things like... she would go home with her school book and it would say Alannah's done colours today or Alannah's done shapes today. And I kind of knew, and Alannah knew, that she'd done them kind of a year and sometimes even 2 years previous to that, So that prompted me really. And Alannah's frustrations, she would very often get frustrated in the specialist setting, and basically through lack of appropriate stimulation, be really, really tired and kind of by lunchtime almost be bored and half asleep and things like that, So I heard about CandLE through a friend and I contacted yourself, Marion, just to see what you felt and kind of if my instincts were correct about Alannah.
And I said, bring her up. And you came in the summer holidays, didn't you?
We did, yeah.
And I was really impressed with your skills back then. And that was before we started teaching you.
Yeah, so now, so we work with Alannah, don't we, Alannah? We work with Alannah in her school at the moment. So she has a provision with us, which is fantastic. You're learning national curriculum learning in your special school, which has been fantastic. And we'll come to sort of all of those things soon. But I think let's hear from Alannah herself. And let's hear Alannah's views of her story and her experiences.
My name is Alannah and I am 10 years old. I have an assistance dog called Zoe.
Fantastic.
Fantastic. So, Alannah, what was school like for you before you got support from CandLE?
I go to a special school and I like a lot of things about it. I like my friends and the fun things we do. I like school trips. I have some teaching assistants who help me. But sometimes, before working with CandLE, it was rubbish. Because I didn't do my work on my eye gaze.
So, how has school and your learning changed since you've been working with CandLE?
I have lessons with CandLE teachers Jodie and Robin, who are my favourite. Now I do my CandLE lessons on my eye gaze. I have been doing some qualifications where I learn to spell, use grammar and punctuation, and answer several tricky questions about my reading. I have a calculator I can use myself. I have been doing worded problems in maths. I love history, science and geography.
Fantastic.
What a fantastic amount of progress just in 3 years.
So without CandLE support, what do you think you would have been doing?
I think I would go to an old people's house when I'm 18.
No. So what are your hopes for the future, Alannah?
To be on TV. I want to be on Britain's Got Talent and lots of other shows. I want to be famous.
That is one good ambition to
Yeah,
have.
you're certainly a very talented young lady.
I'd like to, yes. So we've talked about what prompted you to seek additional specialist support. And just to sort of fill that in, I'd like to really acknowledge the special school for being so supportive, because what they've allowed us to do is go into the school, and they've given us a space, and they've allowed us to work with you at a higher level than they can support you with in the curriculum. So they've allowed us to sort of take you a bit beyond what that particular school can teach. And they've been very supportive of that.
It's great to have that special school support in that way, and they've been so welcoming to us, to get there. But I'm sure it wasn't, there's been fights there, and it wasn't as easy to get to that point.
And also, I think I'd like to acknowledge Nottingham as a local authority, because they were really supportive. I had quite a lot of chats when we were setting this up with the guys, the head of the special educational needs at Nottingham, and he was so willing and so wanting to make this work. And it's a real example of families, external provisions, local authorities and schools working positively together to make a difference for young people like yourself, Alannah. So what I'd like to ask you, Damien, particularly, is how's the EHCP impacted all of this?
Really, the education healthcare plan was crucial to it all. There was a few kind of battles and things at the start with the local authority to the education healthcare plan really specified what Alannah needs to be educated appropriately and to receive the appropriate level of stimulation and education, And what we did was once we saw you, Marion, we had an assessment. We were able to go to the local authority and get that assessment written into Alannah's education healthcare plan, basically, and recognised. So it evidenced what Alannah's potential was and what she needed, the level of provision or input, namely from you guys, from CandLE, the level of input she needed to be appropriately educated, really. So with that, then we could speak to the local authority, get our education healthcare plan amended to reflect that level of provision, and move forward from there, really. So there was nothing stopping Alannah once she had the education provision.
I think that's it, is that education healthcare plan provides that opportunity to really set in stone exactly what a student needs to succeed and to thrive. And the worries with these SEND reforms is what happens once that's scrapped, once the EHCPs go. If they go, what for and what way can parents, families, professionals put down in stone and secure what provision students need to thrive? So that's sort of a big sort of unknown, really, about these SEND reforms. What's going to happen?
And one big thing about the SEND reforms that I've been noticing, and a lot of people I've been speaking to in the disability rights movement have been noticing, it's actually disabled students, physically disabled students, students with communication needs have not been mentioned once throughout the entire process.
Yeah.
It's as if they're just being forgotten in the process. And we know that a lot of these young people are very bright, yourself very included there. And basically, I know that you're now thinking about you're now intent on going to mainstream school. We'll come to that in a minute. But my worry is they're talking about only having EHCPs for students that go to special schools. It is expensive and takes a lot of planning and quite often external support for somebody in a mainstream school who's got complex physical and communication needs. How is that going to be protected? I'm aware that there's talk of giving the mainstream schools a lot more money, but they're not giving them the teeth that they need to actually ask for the support they need to support these students that are bright but physically disabled. And that's my big worry. Just leaving it to the mainstream schools to decide how they spend that money is just going to create enormous problems. It's already a cash-strapped system. How are they going to be able to afford to support students without a system that enshrines those rights to mainstream education in law? That's my question.
For each individual student as well, yeah.
Yeah, that was my kind of another crucial point as a parent, It's a legal document, the Education Healthcare Plan, and it enabled me to kind of legally protect Alannah, to legally advocate for her. And without her Education Healthcare Plan, I would not be able to do that. Basically, I would have had, as a family, we would have been left to watch Alannah be extremely frustrated. Her well-being would take a downturn. She would not receive the right education as other children have. It would just be really, really devastating. And the impact on Alannah's life without the Education Healthcare Plan doesn't bear thinking about.
And that story will be replicated, I'm sure, with loads of families who
There's going to be many, many families,
years and blood, sweat, and tears trying to fight for what their child needs, and actually to have that potentially removed from them. That's a really scary, future possibly for many of our families.
So, Lana, I'd like to come back to you. What's your experience of inclusion?
I have 2 friends who go to mainstream schools. They aren't disabled. We all play together. They do my nail varnish, makeup, and put on jewellery. We have sleepovers. I want to go to mainstream secondary school and do the same lessons they do.
Fantastic.
Absolutely. And why should you not?
Yeah. And why not?
Yeah.
And I understand, Damien, that you've already looked at a couple of mainstream schools. And what's the experience at this beginning of the road like?
It's great, really, in terms of we've just looked, as you say, at 2 schools, but just prior to looking at the schools, it wouldn't have been possible without our Education Healthcare Plan, without CandLE input and appropriate provision, because Alannah thrived. Once she had that correct provision and it was written into her Education Healthcare Plan, she thrived. Her personality came out, her inquisitive nature came out. She plays with her able-bodied friends as an equal now, with equal interests, with age-appropriate interests, age-appropriate. She's a normal, it's like that kind of, see the child, not the disability. Yeah. Because she can communicate and is educated to the same level as her able-bodied children, it's just a lovely relationship, When we went to see the mainstream schools, it hasn't been really as scary to Alannah now, because she's at that level almost. She's almost at that level where she can look around, she can see the mainstream school, the posters, the subjects that they're studying. She's been doing history, as you know, history, geography, English, all the mainstream curriculum subjects. She can go into a classroom and she can recognise all the subjects, and she can speak to the teacher. When a Senko gave us a tour around, she was speaking to the Senko about kind of her favourite subject,
brilliant.
which is science.
Oh, is it science? Right.
Yeah, which is science. And so my experience so far has been really, really good. We haven't decided on a mainstream school yet, but it's just exciting to be at that point, to be able to consider that.
Yeah.
And I think without sort of the provision we provided as specialist provision providers, we've been able to give Alannah access to that mainstream national curriculum within the special needs setting. And that's sort of our sort of goal, really. And that's our worry with these SEND reforms, is what's going to happen to students who might not necessarily have that access to national curriculum. Where do they stand if that support's not going to be there for them to have access to a mainstream national curriculum?
I think a lot of people probably don't realise this, but special schools are not obliged to teach the national curriculum. Now, I am aware that part of the thinking behind the SEND reforms is that there will be more of a requirement for special schools to use the national curriculum, but there's never going to be an insistence that it is the same as the national curriculum that is carried out in mainstream. It means if you start your educational life in a special school, you miss out from day one. If you happen to turn out to be much brighter than people thought you were, and that's true of many students who are currently in special schools, you are slowly having your learning removed from you by not having full access to the national curriculum. So what we've done at CandLE is we've written what we call bridging courses, And our bridging courses are basically based on the national curriculum, and they're for students. And you're one of the first students to go through our bridging courses, Alannah. And the idea of the bridging courses are that you bridge that gap, you catch up. And in fact, I'm very excited to be able to present to you
First
your
of many
first
to come.
certificate. It's in geography, and it's your partial certificate for your progressing level of geography. So congratulations.
Well done, Alannah. And there'll be many more to come, as Alannah's made phenomenal progress through the courses. And this course that Alannah's on is a Key Stage 2 based course, which is the age appropriate level. And as Damien sort of mentioned, having that access to age appropriate curriculum means that jump and that transition to mainstream isn't going to be a big scary impossibility, because we've
bridged the gap. So we are now developing it as a system,
as a model.
We'd like to work as a model. We'd like to work with lots of special schools to provide them with the opportunity for those students they realise, like Alannah, were brighter than they'd originally thought. What can we do to bridge that gap? So we're calling it the Bridge Curriculum Model, and we're hoping to launch it in the new year as a model that we're going to offer to special schools throughout the UK, so that there is that opportunity to move more seamlessly from the special system to the mainstream system. I've heard it said so many times by parents, it's easy to get into a special school, but it's not very easy to get out again.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think as well, obviously, thinking about this in the wider context of these proposed leaks of SEND reforms and what that could mean is how would a student like Alannah be able to get access to some alternative curriculum, the mainstream national curriculum, without having that set out in stone in something like an EHCP. So I think there definitely needs to be thoughts around what's going to be the alternative, because certainly, as you can appreciate, the system's got flaws. The EHCP system at the moment, as it is, probably isn't sustainable. And there are definite,
there's
difficulties and problems and improvements that should and could be made.
I have my own thoughts on that. The clunks and the expensiveness in the system doesn't come from kind of parents and the provision to students. It comes from tribunals and parents kind of challenging local authorities to get the correct provision.
And then they spend the money they should be spending on the students on trying not to support
Absolutely. So
ridiculous.
Kind of, I feel that children like Alannah and other children are almost being victimised and blamed for bad practice by the local authorities and allowing things to go to tribunal, when simple, inexpensive little changes to provision could save millions and millions and millions of pounds. But so they haven't done that, and then they're spending all their money on legal fees and tribunals, when a simple change to provision like Alannah needs her eye gaze on at all times, written into an education healthcare plan, or
if we're going to see the end of educational healthcare plans, something more robust, something that makes your legal rights even more guaranteed.
Yeah.
What we cannot do is just leave it to individual schools. There has to be something in law that protects the right of students to a full education.
It's akin to, it sounds extreme to say this, but it's akin to the old kind of bygone days when children with disabilities were basically placed in asylums, While we wouldn't be placing children in asylums, we would be containing them in
within
provisions, in units that are just, they're being babysat, they're being slightly stimulated, and they're being contained, and they're not being fully integrated into society, which they're part of. They're part of our society, and they need to be protected like any other child. It's as simple as, just protecting their right to education, something that a normal family just, let's get up in the morning and send our children to school. It's just protecting education, and it doesn't have to be extortionately expensive.
No,
and it's not children's fault that the current system needs reformed. So why blame
But the
them?
reform it needs is to actually guarantee that students will have that right to go to mainstream school, no matter what the level of their disability.
Mm-hmm.
It's that entitlement. So the change needs to come from, my feeling is, that we should never be saying, oh, they'd be better off in a special school. We should be saying the mainstream system needs to change so that it can accommodate all students. It's not going to change the way things are at the moment, and it certainly won't change if a load of reforms suddenly emerge, which they may or may not, because it's all leaks at the moment. But if a load of reforms are suddenly thrust upon us with no actual thinking about how do we change mainstream schools so that they welcome everybody.
And they need the support, they need the training, they need, a lot of other things there. Like you say, financially as well, they need that financial support. How are they going to get that without having it written down very clearly that this is what a student needs to thrive? And I think as well, there's been a lot of talks around what they're calling internal alternate provision, where students with special needs are in a mainstream school. So, you can kind of think they have the label of being very inclusive, but actually what's happening is they're just being put into units within the mainstream school, still segregated from their peers, still learning from an alternative curriculum that isn't the national curriculum, and those learning gaps are just widening, but instead within the mainstream setting.
and that's tokenism, which is what disabled children have dealt with for a long time, is just tokenism, and that would be torturous for myself to watch Alannah, to attend a mainstream provision and to watch able-bodied children through a window, when she's perfectly capable of getting qualification, living, and the impact of that on her life, her level of interactions, and being fully integrated in society. So it would be torturous just to place Alannah in a specialist unit within a mainstream. It just wouldn't be kind of good enough. It would be a failure. It would be letting her down.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think as well, this learning gap is something that we're seeing more and more and more, isn't it? This where we've got cognitively able children, students that are able to access national curriculum learning, make progress, go qualifications, have a job and a career, but actually they're being placed in settings that don't offer that progression for them. So they're being capped. Their opportunities are being capped by things that are completely out of their control and beyond their control, by the lack of a curriculum or a lack of opportunities to gain qualifications. So many schools that we visit, they have no qualification pathways for students with special needs. They go 6-7 years in a school and come out with nothing. And we've supported students who have really amazing aspirations for the future, like you do, Alannah, and they find, unfortunately, usually too late, that those aspirations are not being fulfilled because of the lack of opportunities to gain qualifications or experience. I mean, we've spoken to some students who are in their late teens, early 20s, who they've never had the opportunity to learn to read and to write and to use maths.
I'm now teaching students in their 20s how to spell, and they're learning how to spell.
Yeah.
But they've been through the special school system and never learnt to spell and never learnt to read.
Can I just say, just to rewind back a bit, in Alannah's experience of the specialist system, so attended from early years, as I say, I had an instinct and came to you, Marion. I also had an instinct and got a private education psychologist assessment who determined and agreed Alannah has potential and could actually spell. Within the specialist system, they didn't really know that she could spell because it wasn't in the curriculum, It's not an individual school's fault.
Yeah.
It was just they were delivering this sensory curriculum, but Alannah had been sitting in a class able to spell 3, 4, 5-letter words and no one knew.
And that is unfortunately, I come across that a lot.
Yeah. So
when I go into special schools to do assessments, students that actually do have literacy skills, but because, and it's particularly since the introduction of a thing that's called the engagement model.
Yeah.
And the engagement model says we don't have to assess these students and we don't have to teach these students any of the normal pathways to qualifications because they're national curriculum,
or not engaged in
and they're not engaged in subject-specific learning, so we don't need to give them subject-specific learning, so we give them sensory stimulation.
Yeah, and while we're talking about education, healthcare plans, for me as a dad who loves Alannah, it's that well-being, and I just ask anyone to put themselves in the shoes of Alannah, to kind of sit in a classroom, to be able to spell, to be a bit more articulate, and I don't know how many hours a week you're sitting in a classroom, but and it's no wonder to me that Alannah, through lack of stimulation, was getting tired, etc. Whereas now, since CandLE, since the correct provision, Alannah is stimulated, she's inquisitive, she's awake all day, and she comes home, and that inquisitiveness continues. She watches news round, she asks questions about society, everything, and it's just the impact. So while it's an education thing, it's a life thing, and it's a well-being thing as well, that
very
cannot be
much so.
underestimated.
I'm saying, and often there's this sort of thought around a lack of, well, it's really good for social opportunities and social inclusion, but then you have to, is it a good opportunity for social inclusion? And actually, do we not need to be encouraging more and more students to mainstream schools to have the opportunity to be, as you say, culturally included, socially included in society, as typically in a typical sort of way, and actually, are we actually into not being inclusive by keeping students trapped within a system that's not working for them, that's not providing them with those social opportunities and those academic opportunities?
It's been really interesting. I've been doing some training courses through a charity called Teachers 2. Look it up, folks. It's really worth knowing more about Teachers 2. It was set up by one of our students many years ago, and he was in a PMLD class. That stands for Profound and Multiple Learning Difficulties. Students in PMLD classes tend to only be given sensory stimulation. What do we mean by sensory stimulation? We mean glitter balls. We mean
bubbles. Is that
bubbles.
Yeah.
Very pretty rooms that are very nice. Actually, I think we should have sensory rooms on every street corner, but not just separate people off. So that's all they do. So this student set up Teachers 2 because he knew that he was bright, but he couldn't show that he was bright until we came along and set up a way of him eye gazing so that he could communicate. He ended up writing a book called I Can Talk. He has sadly recently died, but his legacy will live on for a very, very long time. So we've been doing training through Teachers 2, and Teachers 2 bring special schools to the trainings. I think we've probably reached about 50 special schools through training, through Teachers 2. We're really grateful for them doing that. And what has been amazing, we always give the special school teachers homework. Go and try some literacy
With your PMLD group.
students that you don't think have any. Every time we give them that homework, half at least will come back and say, we never knew. He knows his alphabet.
Yeah.
She recognised her name. She recognised the name of her friend.
Like in Lana's case, you can spell, and these teachers have not known this.
And the teachers didn't know because they've been told by their senior managers that these kids of pre-national curriculum can't learn, do sensory with them.
I think it's even more important for an education if it's appropriate to say that. It's more important for Alannah to be educated to her potential because of her physical disability. I don't know, she's not going to be able to drive a bus or work in a factory or do any manual jobs, work in Tesco's or anywhere like that. So this is her opportunity to gain employment that is suitable to her having a physical disability, so it kind of emphasizes.
And it is interesting, there are many opportunities, and it's for employment for students that have got complex physical disabilities and communication issues. I'm working with a lot of older students, Alannah, that are getting nearer to that time to go to work. And it's really exciting looking at how you can adapt also in the workplace. You can get support in the workplace, and you can bring those skills that you've learned into the workplace in many exciting ways. And there are lots and lots of jobs that can be carried out by students with very complex physical and communication needs. And without education, you're barred from that. And you're actually becoming the burden on society that society says that you are by society making you that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think a key thing as well is the idea of reasonable adjustments. There needs to be so much more work and exposure to allowing and providing students with physical disabilities, with complex needs, reasonable adjustments that they can thrive. And that's, again, in the EHCP, that can often be a really core part of the provision that a student requires and the support they need. Can outline what reasonable adjustments does that student need to thrive. And without that sort of, clear understanding from all parties, from education, from health, what that is, then that obviously provides another barrier, doesn't it, for learning. So I know you've been doing some work around reasonable adjustments with some of our older students who aren't really aware of reasonable adjustments, and actually it's such a key part in providing access to learning for so many of our students.
So a reasonable adjustment isn't something that gives you an advantage, it's something that takes away disadvantage. So for example, Alannah, you do all your work through a specialist bit of software that was originally developed for your communication, but you now use it to do your work as well. And with that easy access, you're able to put all your thinking into your learning rather than having a difficult time trying to get what you know across. And that's been really important. And that's a reasonable adjustment, that we've been able to put the learning into some software that you can access, and that you can access sometimes at the same pace, sometimes even quicker when you get into mainstream school. You'll find sometimes with this reasonable adjustment, you might be the first to finish, not the last to finish a piece of work in the class.
And you've been doing some assessments recently, haven't you, with Robin and Jodie, age-appropriate assessments that have all been adapted into your software so that you can access assessments like any other child of your age would be assessing, so we can assess students in line with their peers.
And interestingly, this is a really interesting point. We've got an AAC Exams Access Working Group, which is a load of people that know about reasonable adjustments, and we've been working with the exam boards for GCSEs. They have been amazing. The exam boards have really taken it on board. They know they've got a responsibility to give equality of opportunity under the 2010 Equality Act to students like yourself, Alannah. And they've taken it on board. You know where the blocks are? In the mainstream schools. It's the school that take the advice and the guidelines, and they take them as a rule book. It's written in big letters. There will be students for whom these guidelines are not appropriate. You need to look at every individual case. And the schools don't read that line. They go, oh, look, here's the rules. You can only have 25% extra time. No, you can't sit an exam. Actually, the exam boards will give you as many as much extra time as you need, provided you can evidence it. But the schools don't know it. So I go back to the SEND reforms here. And the people that are thinking about the SEND reforms, they need to think about just how skilled the mainstream schools are and how much knowledge they've got. Because a lot of our work is going to the mainstream schools, working with the exams officers, working with the SENCOs, and saying, no, you can have that extra support. You can have those reasonable adjustments. You can include these students in exams. But the knowledge isn't there.
The workforce needs to be skilled up, and that stems probably right back to teacher training and having all of this put into teacher training more explicitly. How can we support students with SEND in the mainstream in the most effective way possible? That needs to be gone right back into teacher training. How can that happen? How does it work logistically? And make use of people, the experts and professionals in the field. You mentioned educational psychologists. They already said, Alannah had all this potential that needs to be listened to and taken on board and acted upon. Take the advice of all of these amazing experts that we have in the field of for physical support, for cognition. All of these experts out there need to be listened to and their advice taken on board for the students to be able to thrive. And the EHCP at the moment, as it stands, does hopefully provide that chance for professionals to come together to work together. So there does need to be some form of the alternative, whatever the alternative would be, needs to make sure that it's considering the value that all of those professionals can bring.
Absolutely. And external bodies as well. This idea that you can just do it internally in a school actually doesn't have the skills already that it needs. It's just not going to work.
I think the health plan, the education healthcare plan, is the most important document in Alannah's life, I would say, so far.
Yeah.
It's just enabled her to develop so much and will enable her to be fully integrated. I know there's a lot of families with the rumours of reforms are just completely nervous, and it's struck a lot of fear into those families of disabled children, So
And unfortunately, the usual platitudes that you get from politicians on the TV saying, "Don't worry, everything's going to be fine. We'll make sure everything's
The reality
fine."
is,
But they
as you
never
say,
tell you
it's
what
the
they're going
fear
to do.
and the worry that this is all causing for so many families across the country. What is going to happen? I mean, they've not. I think it's September, October time potentially. We hear a little bit more, maybe April. And it's a long
we don't
time of
know.
worry.
We're not being given anything to go on other than rumour and leaks.
Just don't punish kind of the vulnerable disabled child for a system that has been expensive, but through no fault of the children. It's through no fault of their own. They're the most important documents in disabled children's lives. Keep them
and improve them.
Protect children's rights and enable parents, give parents the avenue to protect their children and advocate for them successfully. Without them, we're lost. You know?
And put something into teacher training. I remember when I did my teacher training, it was one of the most prestigious teaching training colleges I went to. I had half a day on special needs in a great big auditorium where someone explained they were statements before they were EHCPs. Someone explained a statement. That was it. That was my entire training. I had to go to the Open University and do a course in special needs in order to have my special needs training that was specific.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Yeah, no. So I think there's definitely, lots to think about in terms of what's going forward. But obviously, until we sort of know a little bit more from the government and these proposed reforms, it's still such a grey area.
And we need a consultation. They keep talking about a white paper. Where's the green paper? Where's the consultation? We had a green paper in 2018 that didn't say anything about reforms. And all of a sudden, we're white paper now. Here's the reforms. No, we need consultation now about these specific reforms.
Not just from professionals, from families, from the students themselves, Alannah. People who have these EHCPs, their views need to be taken into account.
And actually, when you have a consultation, they need to be taken into account and not just be a paper exercise.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, so many, and as we say, there are flaws in the system, most definitely, and we can all say there's improvements to be made. And actually, one thing we're really finding is that student voice, pupil voice is just being ignored or not listened to or taken into account. Actually, that should be the most important thing that overrides everything. What does the student need? And we can clearly hear from you, Alannah, before of your aspirations and hopes and your experiences. That should be the driving force for change, not money or financial situations or the views of a school. It should be that the needs of the student.
Needs should drive everything, and entitlement and equality of opportunity is vital.
Yeah, and it's not hard. It's not hard to do that, and it can be done relatively inexpensively if it's done correctly. So.
And if people stop challenging each other and being up against each other, but start working together, like has happened in the end in Nottingham.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And it's the coming together of the local authority, the external body, the student, and the special school working all together that's going to lead you to mainstream and a part in the community and a job.
Yeah, Nottingham are now very supportive of Alannah, and it's excellent to see. So full credit to them. I have to say that as well,
Yeah,
so I think, I think this is coming to the end of our
thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Alannah, so much for your views, and Damien for
thank you very much for
giving
having
us the parent perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.